Well, hi, good morning. Thanks for joining me in my shop again for another run at this radio. So I think what I'm going to work on today is, rather than continue with the alignment, I think I'm going to try to stabilize this thing. So it's not doing that anymore. There was lots of pops and crackles coming out of this radio when I worked on it yesterday, and I think some of it may have been related to me just touching this a little bit. So now would be a good time to sort this out. And I don't think it's a good thing. I don't know. I was going to say I don't think it's a good thing if the metal here contacts the chassis. I'm not actually sure of that, to be honest with you. It's up on grommets here. Often that's to insulate the entire capacitor from the chassis. But I can see a ground strap right here. It comes through a hole and soldered right to the chassis. So there isn't a situation here where this needs to be electrically isolated from the chassis. Why it makes that sound? Well, maybe it wasn't this. But in any case, we mechanically we can't leave it flopping around like this. So what to do? What to do? The way this is held in place, you know what? I don't know for sure how this is done. I have an imaginary notion of how these nuts are put on here and what lies beyond them. I should take one of these off and really see what this is. Let's take a little closer look here and see what we can see. Okay. So the metal clanging is actually this control banging in the circle here. That's what's limiting the motion of this thing. So you can look here. I'm sure it's just dried up grommets. What I'm concerned about is do I really need to put grommets in here? Why would they have done a grommet so rather than just a washer? And you're all answering that question. Yeah. Let's try this guy. Take one of these off. Get that washer out of there. It's really stuck. So if this was just a washer, I think the whole piece would come out. I think it's a grommet. And it's going to fall apart. If I yank on it, it's going to come apart. Should I yank on it? Am I getting myself into bigger and bigger trouble here? Let's take a look at some of the grommets I have. Maybe I have a suitable replacement. Just maybe. I have a set of grommets. It took me 15 minutes to find this when it was just 2 feet away from where it is now. I ran all around my house looking for it. Here it is right on top. Grommets. 125 grommets. I purchased these specifically for this kind of situation. Look at these, they're beauties. Look at these guys. See, couldn't that go through? Can't really see it like that, can you? Yeah, it's a regular grommet. It's question of the diameter, size, all that kind of stuff. Now, where did I get this one from? Something in here's got to work for me. So one thing would be to get a grommet out of the radio and hold it here and compare it, but I'm pretty sure when it comes out it's going to be in pieces. Secondly, pushing one of these in there, you know, the capacitor is sitting inside the radio. It's kind of in its own way. So I wonder if I were to loosen all three, there's three holding nuts here, take them all off, how much of this radio will lift out? Let's take a look at this. Okay, got a bit of a problem here with these wires. These would have to come off. Let's see what else would have to happen here. Some wires coming up to the lights. These guys come off. Easy. And then there's some grounding wires. Is it just the one? Now, perhaps what they're trying to achieve by holding this off the chassis with insulating grommets and everything, and then having one lead come back, is exactly that. To have only one lead between all this stuff and the chassis. Why exactly would they want to do that? I couldn't tell you. But I'm suspicious that there's a problem if you have this thing grounded in a couple of places. Grounded to the chassis. What kind of problem? I don't know. They did all this for a reason. Putting in grommets and isolating this thing rather than bolting it down solid. They did it for a reason. So now, what about just loosening it off and retracting it enough that the threaded posts here lift out of the holes, and then I can really work a grommet into it. You know, there's a good chance of that. But I got to move it about an inch. Interestingly enough, there's about an inch of wire here. Ooh. Seems fairly flexible, but I got this one too. Maybe I can just kind of. Maybe I should try with the screw, with it sitting where it is now. I do it one nut at a time, and that way not move this very much. For fear of moving this piece enough, I'm going to introduce more and more problems. Maybe even something hidden in there. Well, that seems like the first thing to try. But my other alternative here is not to replace the grommets, but to just washer up the nut here a little bit. And would that really work? So you can only screw these nuts down so far, and then they lock. The threaded shaft is only threaded so far on purpose, because otherwise you could tighten these things right down, squeeze the heck out of the grommet, and end up with reduced life. I mean, these things fail because they are squeezed. And so rather than being in a relaxed state, they're under pressure, and this literally splays the molecules out and strains them. And over a long period of time, some chemical changes too with this stuff. Essentially, you can almost think of it as potential energy worked into the rubber, the plastic, and whatever. That's going to cause molecular, long chain molecules to fracture. And slowly, it's all going to crack. That's the story. That's why it is so common. This problem is so common on radios. I think the wisest thing is to try the least intervention first. So what I don't need these grommets, I need washers. I need washers. I have to run out in my garage and get my collection of washers here. Okay, so there's a bunch of plumbing washers and various things there. But on the way out there, I was thinking, why even use rubber the grommet is capped with a metal washer and the nut goes on top. Why don't I just put more metal washers on? That's just going to take up the play. Hey, you know, that's a better way to do it. That's a better starting point anyway. No reason to use rubber. Okay, now we need metal washers. Metal washers. These are mostly lock washers. These are thin guys here. Okay, I need something a little more substantial than these thin ones. Yeah, these are way too thin. The only thing that's got any width is lock washers in here. I can't use that. I don't want to use that. Okay, gotta go back out and hunt around for metal washers. Wow, I got lots of options now. Various collections of stuff here. Let's start with this little tray. So I think I only need 3 to do this. I'm not sure what width. A fair width. So here's a locking washer. It's got some width to it. Look at that guy. So that's what's in here. Here I've kept washers in here. Pretty thin in there. Okay. And then I have a bunch of washers here. These are kind of like brass. Hey, these are pretty nice. There's all kinds of them, so I can build them up to get the width I want. I think I'm going to use these guys. Okay, well, this one's ready to go. This is easy. If this works, this is really the easy way to do this. But Jim, it'll never last. Well, you know, nothing is going to last. You're busy putting in new capacitors in all these radios. All those capacitors are going to die someday, too. Oh, here we go. That's good. That's why I'm very reticent to change some things like wires that are in fairly good shape in a radio like this. They've been in there for 80 years. They've proven themselves. And I'm going to put something modern on there and thinking that, well, the materials must be better. I could tell you a story from the electric power distribution industry. I will. So in the early days of electric power distribution, cables were developed. That's a pretty interesting story in itself. I won't go into that. But eventually, I think it was in Italy, working cables were produced using the materials of the day. So we're talking about late 1800s, early 1900s. And they ended up using the materials of the day, which is oil, paper, lead, and copper. And out of those materials, they built high voltage cables that would carry 5,000 volts, 10,000 volts inside them. This is an insulated cable. And you can imagine it took decades to sort out some of the unexpected problems that developed with doing this, using lead in particular. Lead has a tendency to crack. Lead is a very unstable metal. You know, it's close to its melting point at room temperature. Close enough that it's actually quite active, if you like, if I can put it that way. Anyway, it took decades to sort out the problems with this kind of cable. I mean, paper, and you have to wrap the paper around the conductors using huge machines, and it's complicated to make it. You have to take like 10 tons of this cable, half made, stick it into a huge vacuum container, vacuum out all the air. I mean, this is the size of a bus, if you like, you're working with. Vacuum out all the air. Can you imagine that? Pulling a vacuum on a tank the size of a swimming pool with a reel of half-made cable in there. Very, very complicated to make these cables, but it all got worked out. It all got worked out. So by 1935, 1940, maybe really just after the Second World War, all the problems were resolved. For instance, the lead cracking problem was resolved with special lead alloys. And voila, suddenly cables were being made that would last, instead of 10 years, would last 100 years. As long as you don't abuse these cables. Okay, so here's where the story gets interesting. Around about 1970, a new kind of cable came out. Made from plastic. Plastic, what a stupid situation. Plastic insulation. No more paper, no more oil. Just have your copper conductor, plastic around it. And you wrap some thin copper tape around that. Throw on a nice cover, a nice plastic cover. Bingo. High voltage cable. No oil, no vacuum, no lead. Easy to splice. Fantastic. Well, it took the industry by storm. In fact, a lot of the newer utilities, the ones that were expanding in the 60s and that, just went for this new kind of cable. Who wants to deal with the lead cable? Lead cable's a big problem, man. You need really skilled people to make the cable splices, and on and on and on it goes. This plastic stuff promised to be fantastic. Nobody knew how long it was going to last, so they wanted to do studies. I read this stuff because of the work I was doing at the time. I read these studies. The initial studies suggested that this plastic cable would have a 1,000-year life. How did they come to that conclusion? They did something called accelerated life testing. You know what? That's the stupidest thing in the world. Accelerated life testing. Let's say you want to know how a drug is going to affect an 80-year-old man. You don't have any 80-year-old men. You're a little afraid to test 80-year-old men. You can't wait 60 years for the 20-year-olds you've got to get 80 years. You can't wait. So what do? So you take a 20-year-old man and make him into an 80-year-old man. How do you do that? You heat him up, or you run him around a track, you feed him lousy food, and you claim he's just like an 80-year-old. Then you test your drug, and there you go. Now you know what's going to happen on an 80-year-old. No, you don't. Same thing with this cable. I'll tie all this back to this work in a minute. They perform these tests on this brand new cable. They want to know how long is it going to last. So they heat it up, they bang it around, they stick it in ice water, they do everything they can think of. And then they declare a 1,000-year life. So for 10 years, utilities are installing this cable in the ground. The United States relied on something called high molecular weight polyethylene cable for underground service cable to people's homes. Didn't get popular here in Canada. In Canada, the younger utilities used this cross-linked polyethylene high voltage cable, sticking it in the ground. Year number 10 comes, boom, one of them fails. Huh? At 10, it's supposed to last 1,000. Year 11, boom, 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 boom. Year 12, boom, 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 boom. The stuff's just failing everywhere. Meanwhile, the 1930s lead sheath paper insulated cable still working reliably. Even after 40 years of service. You're going to get another 40 years out of it. But many utilities loaded with this modern cable that surely will last longer than the old stuff, won't it? No. The economy, down the drain. I'll carry on this story, I'm so far into it. Part of the cheap construction with this plastic cable is to not put it in a duct and manhole system, but just bury it in the ground. Just dig a trench, throw it on in there, and cover up the trench, put grass on it, trees above it, sidewalk over it. Hey, beautiful. Maybe stick a road over top of it. The old lead cable, you didn't really want to do that. You had to build manholes and conduit. Oh my God. Pull the cable in, spend money, really expensive putting in that old lead cable. Which is seldom done anymore, by the way. So, many cities loaded with this plastic cable, 1,000-year cable that only lasts 12. Direct buried. So, in the end, the economic drain on society is significant over this. This is a societal problem. We have less hospitals, because we had to put the money into cables because of this 1,000-year estimate, which turned out to be bogus. So going back to this radio, I see wires in this radio that have been in here for almost 100 years. Some of them are shot, some of them are not. If I'm going to replace all the shot, replacing the shot wires may make sense at this point in time. The insulation's cracked off, you got to put something in there, maybe that makes sense. But changing them all for the sake of changing them with new wires may be a bad mistake. Well, I'm not saying it is. But just to the crux of my point here, just because it's modern doesn't mean it's better. I mean, maybe 9 times out of 10 it is. Oh, you know what I'm going to do now? I am now going to break this wire again on this little coil here. Okay, sorry I got so excited over that, but I was in the midst of all this cable stuff. That's why you see me getting a little excited here. This is going to work. This is simple. Can I put that tighter? You know what? This is not working. So I think what's happening is the existing washer is getting caught on the shoulder of the threaded piece. So the threaded piece is coming through. You can't see it, but the shaft gets a little wider, and this piece I'm putting, the original washer there, is sitting on the shoulder. And I'm tightening down the screw. All I'm doing is squeezing on the shoulder. I'm not squeezing anything down below. So that means I can't just stick metal washers in there. It means that that's actually an ineffective approach. What would be effective? Larger washers that slip over the shoulder and actually squeeze down onto here. I think we know where that'll go in the end. Or back to putting new grommets in. I really want the easy way out of this. When I slip off the original washer, put under it larger washers that'll slip over the shoulders and compress the grommet underneath it. How big a washer would I need? I certainly got something here. I've got something here that'll do that. I can't even see the shoulder though. Okay, let's see if I can give you a more thrilling perspective here, video perspective on this. Thrilling might be difficult. It might be difficult. Oh, how about this? How about this perspective? You consider that to be a thrill? That'd be a thrill. Just 1 second here. I'm just getting a focus control up here. No, I think it's more thrilling this way. And you cannot see the actual thing I'm working on here. There she be. So I'm going to try to pop that washer off and see how much wider the okay, well, I think I know what I just took off. I just ripped the grommet right in two. Okay, now, you see there's clearly a collar. You can really see it now. Just as I suspected. I gotta stick a whole new grommet in there. That means I gotta loosen off these other ones. I'm gonna try just by flexing this whole structure without actually removing it. I'm trying to get out of this as cheaply as possible. You know, taking this kind of approach where you try to do things the easy way often ends up being the hardest way of all. You know the old saying about if you're going to do something, always do it right? I can't believe that for a second. Don't break the wire. Right, and this piece is fixed right in here. I can't move this. It's right where I want to put this tool. Hello. I'll stay up here with this tool, up above here. You're not quite seeing what I'm up to, are you? Let's change it like that. So I'm going above. I'm staying away from the little lead wires if I can. Oh, this isn't going to work either. See, you know, you put this together, these parts aren't in here. Holy smokes. Wow. See, what's going to happen here is I'm going to have to grip tightly with this tool. I'm going to have a lot of power and strength in it, and as I move it, I won't realize if I'm banging up against something weak or, you know, some little wire. I'll end up breaking the wire again. Man. Oh boy. What if I leave that one the way it is? What if I just leave that? Look at this. Look at this. There's under that particular screw. My wire strapped under that particular nut is a ground. Look at, there's a grounding point. So that thing about only one grounding point, well, that's a load of bull. It came out of me. Because where's that other nut? Here's the other nut buried. It's buried down in here too. Why, has it got one coming off too? There's an opposite. The opposite of having one ground point on something is to have as many as you can find, as many as you can get. So this thing's well grounded. But you know, that could have been the source of some of the crackling too. Obviously this thing can't be that clamped down that tight anymore. Oh, can it? Yes, it could. Could be. It could be because the nut is squeezing against the collar on the threaded part. I'm going to break that wire with my camera. So as long as that nut is tight, it doesn't matter about the grommet or anything. You follow what I'm saying? I don't know, am I following what I'm saying? Okay, so if I'm going to try to change the grommet there, oh my gosh, this is a disaster in the making. Okay, tell you what, here's what I'll do. I'll change the grommet on this one. We'll see where we end up. Maybe that'll just stabilize this whole thing enough. Oh, I can't change the grommet on that one without loosening the other one, for crying out loud. Oh my gosh. This is a persistence issue. Oh my gosh. Yeah, wow. Okay, I'm a little bit flummoxed here. I am flummoxed. So if this thing is grounded solid, what's stopping me from the heck with the grommets and just washering this thing up with a big pile of metal washers? Just to come all the way out above the collar and then screw down onto the collar. Well, I still got a little bit of grommet on the top side. So insulation doesn't seem to be an issue. Why did they do all this? Why don't they bolt this thing solidly down? What is the problem with doing that? Why? I don't know. But apparently there is a problem with doing that. Huh? I'm stuck here. Bigger washers right down onto the chassis. Well, that's an easy way out of the situation I'm in, so why don't I do that? How big a washer do you need? Well, this has got the same size as the other ones. The same size hole, and it will not fit over the collar. It's close though. I need something bigger than that. Like that. Nope, that won't even go over the collar. The shoulder. I think maybe a shoulder is the right word for that part. Well, here's a giganto one. It's probably too big for some reason or another. Definitely bigger than the collar. So what would happen if I put like a rubber washer on top of that? If I put a grommet inside of the washer. Why do I want to have rubber over top of this? Look, right beside it is connections that are just bare, and if they touch the chassis, nobody cares the way it's built. So why should I care about this washer? Why do you need a rubbery floating connection? Could be in some cases when a radio goes back into its cabinet, the chassis is bolted down. Well, it's always the case. The chassis is bolted down. In some cases there are clips and other ways in which the front part is attached to the front of the cabinet. So maybe the purpose then is a little bit of grommeting in here, gives a little bit of play in here, and so you don't end up with a situation, because the cabinets cannot be 100% exact in their construction. This provides an allowance. That's probably what's going on here. We'll leave it at that. That crazy theory. Now, what I want to do is stick a washer. Well, let's just try the metal thing. Let's try the metal thing. Pretty big washers there. I must have some out in the clear here. Maybe not. Okay, let's steal these ones. Whopper. What am I trying to do with it? I think I need more than one washer. That's what I need. That's what I'm doing with it. Both my cats are playing together behind me. Okay, just hang there. Just hang there. Good. Try putting this nut on. Why have I got two nuts here? That's a silly question for a man to ask, isn't it? It's not a question my cats would ask. Okay, tighten her down. What have we succeeded in? Still, didn't succeed in much here, did we? So I'm going to fiddle with this for probably the rest of my morning here. There's just nowhere near enough washers under there. Or I don't have it tightened down far enough yet. No, that's it. Wait a minute. How can that be the end of the road for the nut? Only if the nut is hitting the collar. Really? Is that what's happening? The nut hits the collar. Yes, the nut hits the collar. At least in this configuration. So I gotta have enough washers that the nut can't reach the shoulder. Put in even more. When I was working in the power industry, one of the things I took pride in was helping to maintain existing facilities and not just, you know, use capital expenses to replace everything all the time, but actually go and take a look and figure out what's going on with them, and then make maybe small investments rather than wholesale changes. And I was quite proud about that. Hey, you know what? That is going to work. Eventually, someday, at some point, I'm going to get enough washers in here to make this work. And you know, if I clamp this one down really hard, and some of you might be saying, Jim, you're making a huge mistake you don't know about. Well, I don't yet. I don't know I'm making a mistake. If I clamp this one down hard enough, maybe it's just going to be enough all around. I think that's big enough. Didn't I get enough? Wow. And besides, I'm using up all my bigger washers. You know what I do in a situation like this sometimes is I'll take a nut, a large nut, and use it like a washer. I don't know if this one's big enough. It's a little tricky to tell now. Okay. Kind of getting there. So what I'm going to do just what I said I do something. I'm going to put a nut in there because I'm going to have 18 washers on here before long. Look at that. Slug rejection. Now, to take the other approach, I need a nice big nut like that. Even bigger. Give me bigger. Yeah, something. It's got to have a big hole in the middle. Wow! Look at that thing. Let's try that. That's got to have an effect. Holy smokes! This is almost going to be too big. Okay, just hang there. Stick a washer on it now because the nut I'm going to put on will go right inside that thing. Let's see if there's any threads exposed. Well, that didn't work. Crazy. think there's any threads exposed. So I think this is... Oh, goes my camera. I think this is 222. Where'd the other one go I had? Thought I had one that was pretty good. No, it's too small. I should have left it out. I did leave it out. That looks like that should work. Okay, I'll just put the nut on. Okay. What do we get? Oh, look at that. It's way better. You know what I've done now? Makes sense. I can't pull this down. Can I pull this down too far? How can that happen? Because the reason I'm saying that is because it's maybe I should have looked right at these at the beginning, because none of them are in the center. Running high, like this whole piece is sunk, which it has, because the grommets have collapsed. Ooh, ooh, ooh! To raise this guy, I have to do the same kind of washering thing, but up on the top here. So how bad is it? How bad is the situation here? It's really not that bad. Really? How come that how come my wonderful work had stabilized this thing? It's really begging me to do it to this other one. You know, then I'd have two legs of the stool. The third leg is this other nut. To get the 3 legs, you got a lot of stability. I could stabilize this one easy enough, do the same kind of thing. How's that going to help the situation? Got to put more washers in here, squeeze this one tighter. I'm not pushing up to the collar now. I'm trying not to push up against the collar. I'm trying to push. Just hang there. Perfect. Gotta remember to wind up my arm before I do this here. Okay, wind her up. And unwind. Got it. Oh, you can see this moving. Oh, hot diggity dog. Look at that. Okay, now, what have we done here? We've got this right at the bottom here. Maybe there's some other way I can... Because I definitely dragged it down now. Especially because I'm essentially disabling the collar, the mechanical effect of the shoulders. Hey, this is still loose. No, it's just a reflection jumping around. So what's the big deal with that down there like that? How come that's a big deal? That's something I should worry about. Does it really matter? I'm not gonna flop around anymore. That was my main objective. So I've achieved the objective. No more flopping. It's remotely possible this might cause a problem installing this back in the cabinet. But just take a peek. No, I don't think so. Occasionally there's pieces of trim wood and stuff like that in the cabinet that are counting on the radio being a certain dimension, and no, I don't think there is in that one. You know, I think that's going to be good enough. It's a silly... It's silly that it took me this long to stick some washers into something. That's what's silly. And I'll put this back in my collection here. The washers. Put them in there. Okay. Success with that. Fantastic. I think that's it for that. I'll get on with the next alignment stage now. Hey, thanks for watching this.